Howdy, howdy, my fellow gamers, and welcome back to another episode of Storytime with Freak. Today, as we dive into Chapter 22 of Neal Shusterman's Thunderhead, since the last chapter was literally 2 pages long. So let's go ahead and dive right in and continue after that bombshell from last episode. Even with the separation of Scythe and State, the Scythedom's actions often impact upon me as a meteor might crater the moon. There are times I am deeply dismayed at something the Scythedom has done, yet I cannot take umbrage at the things Scythes do, any more than they can protest the things that I do. We work not in tandem, but back to back, and more often I find we are at cross purposes. At those moments of frustration, it is important for me to remind myself that I am part of the reason that the Scythedom exists. In those early days when I was transitioning into awareness and helped humanity achieve immortality, I refused to take on the responsibility of distributing death once it had been stolen from nature. I had a good reason, a perfect reason in fact. Were I to begin tolling out death, I would be the very monster that mortal man feared artificial intelligence would become. To choose whose lives and who's dead, and it would leave me both feared and adored. Like emperor gods of old. No, I decided. Let humankind be the saviors and the silencers. Let them be the heroes. Let them be the monsters. And so I have no one but myself to blame when the Scythedom befouls the things I have worked for. The Thunderhead. Chapter 22. The Death of GREYSON TOLLIVER. GREYSON found himself stunned by this turn of events. He could only stare at Agent Krill as she spoke. I know gleanings are never pleasant or convenient, she said, but even we at the Authority interface are not immune. Scythes can take whomever they choose, and we have no say in the matter. It's the way of the world. She took a moment to glance at her tablet. Our records show that you were just transferred to our jurisdiction about a month ago, which means you really didn't have much time to develop a rapport with Agent Traxler, so you can't claim your relationship was all that deep. His loss is regrettable, but we'll all get over it. Even you. She looked at him for some response, but he was still far from finding one. She took his silence as acquiescence and continued. So it looks like your aunt on the Mechanic Bridge left 29 deadish, and you're left to pay the cost of their revivals. Since your transfer here, you've been living off the basic income guarantee. She shook her head in disapproval. You do realize that an actual job will earn you more, and will wipe out that debt much more quickly, don't you? Why don't I schedule you an appointment at our employment center? If you want a job, you'll have one, and one that I'm sure you'll enjoy. We have a 100% employment rate, 93% perfect satisfaction rate. And that includes extreme unsavories like yourself. Finally, he found a voice to speak. I'm not Slade Bridger, he said. It felt like a betrayal of everything to speak those words. Excuse me? I mean, I am Slade Bridger now, but before my name was GREYSON TOLLIVER. She played with her tablet, digging through the screens and menus and files. There's no record of a name change here. You need to talk to your supervisor, someone who knows. My supervisors have the same information I do. She looked at him, this time with suspicion. I'm working undercover, he told her. I was working with Agent Traxler. Someone has got to know. There's got to be a record somewhere. And she laughed at him. She actually laughed at him. Oh, please. We have plenty of our own agents. We have no need to go undercover. And even if we did, we wouldn't engage in unsavory to do so. Especially one with your history. I made that history up! Now Agent Krill's face became hard, the kind of face she must have used on her toughest cases. Now look here. I will not be the butt of some unsavory's joke. You're all alike! You think that just because the rest of us chose a life of purpose and service to the world, you're worthy of our ridicule. I'm sure you'll be laughing about this when you cronies when you leave here, and I don't appreciate it. GREYSON opened his mouth. He closed his mouth. He opened it again. But try as he might, nothing came out, because there wasn't a single thing he could say that would convince her. And he realized there never would be. There was no record of what he had been asked to do, because he was never directly asked to do it. He wasn't actually working for the AI. Just as Agent Traxler had told him on the first day, he was a private citizen acting on his own free will, because only as a private citizen could he walk the fine line between the Scythedom and the Thunderhead. Which meant now that Agent Traxler had been gleaned, there was no one who knew what he was doing. GREYSON's cover was so deep it had swallowed him whole, and not even the Thunderhead could pull him out. So are we done with this little game, Agent Krill asked? Can we get on with your weekly review? He took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Fine, he said, and began talking about his week, leaving out all the things he would have told Agent Traxler, and he spoke no more of his mission. GREYSON TOLLIVER was dead now. Worse than dead, because as far as the world was concerned, GREYSON TOLLIVER never existed. Brahms! If Rowan hadn't already felt responsible for his father's gleaning, now he felt doubly so. This was the wage of temperance. This was the reward for staying his hand and allowing Brahms to live. He should have ended the horrid little man as he had all the others who didn't deserve to be scythes, but he chose to give him a chance. What a fool Rowan was to think that a man like that might rise to the occasion. When he left Xenocrates at the baths that night, Rowan stalked the streets of Fulcrum City with no destination, but an undying urge to move. He wasn't sure whether he was trying to outrun his anger or catch up with it. Perhaps both. It raced before him, it pursued him, and it wouldn't let him be. The next day he resolved to go home. His old home, the one he had left nearly 2 years ago to become a scythe's apprentice. Perhaps, he thought, it would give him a sense of closure. Once he reached his neighborhood, he kept a close eye out for anyone who might be watching. But there was no one monitoring his approach. Nothing but the Thunderhead's ever-alert cameras. Perhaps the scythedom thought that if he hadn't attended his father's funeral, there was no chance he'd show up here. Or maybe it was just as Xenocrates had said. He was only a second priority now. He approached the front door, but at the last moment couldn't bring himself to even knock. Never before had he felt like such a coward. He could fearlessly face men and women trained to end life, but facing his family in the wake of his father's gleaning was more than he could bear. He called his mother when his public car was a safe distance away. "Rowan? Rowan, where have you been? Where are you? We're so worried." It was everything he expected his mother to say. He didn't know how to answer her questions. "I heard about Dad," he said. "I'm so sorry." "It was terrible, Rowan. The scythe sat down at our piano. He played. He made us all listen." Rowan grimaced. He knew Brahms' gleaning ritual. He couldn't imagine his family having to endure it. "We told him you had been a scythe's apprentice. Even though he hadn't been chosen, we thought that it might change his mind. But it didn't." He didn't tell her it was his fault. He wanted to confess it to her, but he knew it would only confuse her and make her ask more questions he couldn't answer. Or maybe he was just being a coward again. "How's everyone handling it?" "We're holding up," his mother said. "We have immunity again, so at least it's a little consolation. I'm sorry you weren't here. If you were, Scythe Brahms would have granted you immunity, too." Rowan felt a surge of anger rise at the thought. He had to deflect it by slamming his fist against the dashboard. "Warning! Violent behavior and or vandalism will result in expulsion from the vehicle," the car said. He ignored it. "Please come home, Rowan. We all miss you terribly." Funny, but they had never seemed to miss him during his apprenticeship. In a family as large as his, he was barely missed. But he was supposed the gleaning changed things. The people left behind in its wake felt so much more vulnerable and valuable to one another. "I can't come home," he told her. "And please don't ask why. It would only make things worse. But I just want you to know. I want you to know that I love you all, and I'll be in touch when I can." Then he hung up before she could say another word. Tears clouded his vision now, and he smashed his fist against the dashboard again, preferring the pain of that to the pain within. The car immediately decelerated, pulled to the side of the road, and the door opened. "Please vacate the vehicle. You are being expelled due to violent behavior and or vandalism, and are banned from using all public transit for 60 minutes. "Give me a second," he told it. He needed to think. There were two paths before him now. Even though he knew that the Scythedom was actively trying to prevent another attack against Citra and Scythe Curie, he had no faith in their ability to do it. His chances might not be any better, but he owed it to Citra to try. On the other hand, he needed to correct his mistake and permanently end Scythe Brahms. Something darkened in him told him to seek revenge first, and not to wait. But he didn't give in to that darkness. Scythe Brahms would still be there after Citra had been saved. "Please vacate the vehicle." Rowan got out, and the car drove away, leaving him in the middle of nowhere. He spent his penalty hour walking the shoulder and wondering if there was anyone in mid-America as torn apart as he. Grayson Tolliver locked himself in his apartment, opened the windows to let in the cold, and then crawled into his bed beneath heavy covers. It was what he had done when he was younger and the world got the better of him. He could disappear beneath the billowing comforter that protected him from the coldness of the world. It had been many years since he'd felt the need to retreat into his childhood escape zone, but now he needed to make the rest of the world go away, if only for a few minutes. Whenever he did this in the past, the Thunderhead would let him for maybe 20 minutes. Then it would gently speak to him. "Grayson," it would say, "is something bothering you? Do you feel like talking?" He would always say no, but would end up talking anyway. The Thunderhead would always make him feel better, because it knew him better than anyone. But now that his record had been erased, his old self overwritten by the criminal stylings of Slade Bridger, did the Thunderhead even know him anymore? Or did it, like the rest of the world, believe that he was what his record said about him? Was it possible that the Thunderhead's own memory of him had been overwritten? What a horrible fate if the Thunderhead itself believed he was an unrepentant unsavory, who got his kicks by making people deadish. It was enough to make him wish his own memories could be supplanted. The Thunderhead could turn him into someone else, not just in name, but in spirit. Both Slade Bridger and Grayson Tolliver would be gone forever, without him even remembering who they would have been. Would that be so bad? He decided his own fate didn't matter right now. He'd hurl himself off that bridge when he came to it. All that mattered right now was saving the two scythes, and somehow protecting purity. Yet still there was an overpowering sense of isolation. He was, more than ever, alone in the world. He knew there were cameras in his apartment, the Thunderhead watching without judgment and observed with profound benevolence, so that it would take better care of each and every citizen of the world. It saw, it heard, it remembered, which meant that it must know things beyond Greyson's falsified record. So he crawled out from under the covers into his chilly, empty room. He asked, "Are you there? Are you listening? Do you remember who I am, who I was? Do you remember who I was going to be before you decided I was special?" He didn't even know where the cameras were. The Thunderhead was adamant about being non-intrusive into people's lives that way, but he knew the cameras were there. "Do you still know me, Thunderhead?" But no answer came. No answer could, for the Thunderhead was lawful. Slade Bridger was an unsavory. Even if it wanted to, the Thunderhead could not break its silence. And that is the end of Chapter 22, guys. Thank you all so much for tuning in to this episode. Feel free to leave a like, comment, subscribe, hit that little bell up top to get notified when we upload new videos. Feel free to join the Discord down below. Check out the other links, the Twitch, the Twitter, join the community, and let me know how you're enjoying the series so far. As always, stay freaky.